Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. This week, we're talking about holding hands. So, this week's episode, we talked about my new book, Uncomplicating Wellness. In the book, there's a chapter called Just Hug a Person. And it's really about the importance of connection. And we've also talked about connection and community as one of the key longevity factors in the episode, The Longevity Equation. Now, even more fitting for talking about holding hands now is it's kind of an interesting launch into next week's episode. So I'm just going to drop that little teaser here and have everybody come back next week when we talk to Dr. Jillian. But for today, about holding hands, how does it connect to our health? So much. So I wanted to look at some of the research. Now, I think maybe most interesting, there's a study from Harvard that began in 1938. It is still ongoing. They started with 724 participants, and it now includes 3 generations with more than 1,300 descendants. So they looked at the impact of connection, and more specifically, secure connections across every phase of life, every decade. And what they concluded is that something seemingly minor, like holding hands, can help manage stress and emotions. In other studies, we see that someone holding another person's hand during medical testing, so there was one study where it was during an fMRI, a functional MRI, can have a calming effect and even diminish the amount of pain that someone feels. So I was reading this study and I was thinking, we do this all the time instinctually. Think about when someone's laying in a hospital bed. What do? It's like human instinct to take their hand. And that's when I'm like, okay, human nature just fascinates me. And then we think about this innate thing about holding hands. Think about a baby and their grasp reflex, right? That's holding hands. You touch their palm and their hand closes around your finger or whatever. That's holding hands. And by the way, in other research, that grasp reflex, all of this is not even specific to humans. Like primates and, also have that too. But I digress. So how does it work that holding hands can manage emotions, minimize stress, decrease pain? So one thought is that it connects to the vagus nerve. We've talked about the vagus nerve before. So the vagus nerve is the literal connection between the gut and the brain. The skin of the hands is highly sensitive. So pressure on the skin of the hands stimulates what's called Pacinian corpuscles. These are sensory receptors on the skin. And our hands are incredibly sensitive. So they sense this pressure. It sends signals to the vagus nerve, which signals the hypothalamus in the brain. The hypothalamus then lowers the heart rate, lowers blood pressure, produces oxytocin, and decreases the stress response. The vagus nerve also interacts because it runs from the brain to the gut. It interacts with all of our largest organs. So it also connects to the heart with blood pressure and digestion in the gut and all of these things. So more research. So there was a study from 2015 published in Frontiers in Psychology titled Self-Soothing Behaviors with Particular Reference to Oxytocin Release Induced by Non-Noxious Sensory Stimulation. That's a mouthful. Basically, what they found is that more oxytocin helps us feel closer and more connected to someone. So when you experience holding hands, provided it's a welcome touch, we'll give that caveat, right? Provided it's a welcome touch, the orbital frontal cortex of the brain, so it's kind of like behind the eyes is why I'm pointing to my forehead for those of you who can see this. It lights up that part of the brain behind the eyes. It's the same part of the brain that lights up when we taste something sweet like chocolate. It's the same part of the brain that lights up when we smell something pleasant. So we had a nutrition nugget on hugs, which plays into the chapter of Uncomplicating Wellness called Just Hug a Person. But there's a stress reduction and a decreased cortisol production from physical touch of holding hands, just like a hug. So it was one study that looked at people doing something stressful. So think like taking a timed test. And some participants received hugs or held hands with their partners. And that group of people had lowered blood pressure and heart rate during the test compared to the people who didn't. And then there was another study, it was published in Behavioral Medicine, that looked specifically at blood pressure. So they had two groups. So one group of people had to hold hands while watching a romantic video for 10 minutes and then have a 20-second hug. Then they had to do like a public speaking thing. The other group rested for 10 minutes and 20 seconds before the public speaking. Those who had the hand holding and hug maintained lower blood pressure and heart rate through the public speaking. And by the way, public speaking is like one of the top fears in the world. You know, people would rather die than, speak in public. So then on the physical pain thing, there are studies that look at not just physical pain, but even emotional pain and our emotional state. So one study had people holding hands with their significant other while watching a horror movie. And the movie had less of an impact on their physiology. And by the way, that physiology is like the unconscious functions, like how much your pupils dilate. So it wasn't even things that we could, even think about controlling in those kinds of scenarios. So it seems holding hands with a loved one calms our response to threat. Researchers have analyzed all this data, and certainly more data than what I've shared with you here. And they talk about the power of connection. And some of the people who really focus on this talked about how the research suggests that holding hands helps the brain offload the work of confronting stress. That almost like when we hold someone's hand, like when we hold the hand of a loved one, especially in a difficult time, there's a gesture that signals you're sharing that burden with them. Even if you're not actually taking anything on, there's like this subconscious communication. And so I think all of this is really just evidence of the importance of connection. And there was a quote I read in looking through all this research, and honestly, I can't say it any better, so I'm going to read you what he said. So this guy is James Cohn, C-O-A-N. He's a clinical psychologist and the director of the Virginia Affective Neuroscience Laboratory at the University of Virginia. He said, if you really understand hand-holding, what it is, and how it has its effects, you begin to understand just about every single facet of what it is to be a human being. It expresses all the things that we are for each other. And then he developed what he calls the social baseline theory, that essentially it is a social baseline to be connected. It is fundamentally human to be connected, and it is feeling alone that is the stressor. Feeling alone is the problem, more than it is that the feeling of connection offers something above and beyond. That, the holding hands is what brings us back to being human, back to that baseline. And that loneliness thing and all that stuff plays into next week's episode. So, Lori, Ronnie, thoughts? Anything you want to share? Any questions?
I just love that something so basic as holding hands can do so much for individuals. And again, connects them as a community.
Yeah.
We don't even have to verbalize anything, right? And we can be there for each other just by simple touch. I love it.
I do too. I think that's perfect. And I think it also explains why Drew Barrymore is always holding her guests' hands and encroaching on their personal space. Because I really feel like it brings people, I know she gets a lot of crap for it, but I think it helps people connect to each other.
Totally. By the way, I think it's worth noting because, not to call anybody out, I'm single, right? So I will just have you know.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if there are romantic feelings with the person that you hold hands. It could be a friend, it could be a family member, that doesn't matter. The only piece that I will say is that it doesn't really work if you hold your own hand. There is a piece of some sort of calming and stress release, because you get warmth and comfort from holding your own hand, but it's still not the same. So even for the single people out there, you're fine. you can hold hands with people. Well, there you have it, everybody. That is the health benefits of holding hands. As always, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I am at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideoffries.com. This is your personal invitation. Join us at the virtual book launch and mini summit, October 29th, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you're listening to this after that date, no worries. Click the link in the episode notes below. Pick up your copy of Uncomplicating Wellness. Ditch the rules. Quiet the noise, reclaim your life. Caroline, Ronnie, Pam, Lori, thank you again for joining me for this, for being incredible early readers and part of our book launch team. I'm so grateful for each of you.
So happy for you, Jen. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. And of course, everybody, if you are not already, I invite you to the Happy Healthy Hub. You'll go to asaladwithasideoffries.com/membership. This shows your support for this podcast, this community, and of course, above all, it supports your health. On top of the 24/7 Ask Me Anything, community chat, discounts, and curated content, you'll get this week's recipe for the ground turkey sweet potato skillet. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.